buying a house. Relativity, anchoring, sunk cost, and mental accounting. So let's talk about how are housing decisions made? How should we think about which house do we get? What features does it have inside of it? What are all of the elements that we want? What's the location of the house? Is it close to a school? Is it close to a, all of these things are relevant, right? And how do people actually make decisions? Let's look at just this question of the size of the house. And in this study, they were looking at folks coming from places like San Francisco, which have a very high cost of living, and places like Gadsden, Alabama, which is a low cost of living, and moving to a place like Pittsburgh. And I think this is a relevant conversation for today, especially with COVID and all. We're all kind of, or many of us are kind of shifting seats. We're going to different places. People are shifting their lifestyle because of the kind of remote and work from home situations that we're in. And so the question here is what happens, right? San Francisco or Gadsden, Alabama, moving to Pittsburgh. And for the purpose of this analysis, what they did is they held constant people's kind of wealth, right? So we could assume here, like it would be easy to be like, oh, well, the San Francisco person is wealthier than the Alabama person. But again, in this analysis, they controlled for that. And so what did they find? San Francisco, moving from San Francisco with the same wealth level as someone moving from Alabama, moving to Pittsburgh, ended up with larger homes than smaller homes. So what's happening here? I'm gonna unmute or put in chat. Why is this happening? Why is the San Francisco person ending up with a bigger house in comparison to the Gadsden, Alabama person when they're income?
Sounds like anchoring to me.
Yeah, there's some relativity, absolutely, process anchoring. Yeah, there's homes in the San Francisco Bay Area. People are used to being like, oh, there are multiple millions, and so all of a sudden, these homes seem cheaper, right? Absolutely, anchoring, relativity, both related concepts. There's no inherent value in something. The way humans we determine value is relative to other things. So similarly, you raise your hand if you may have experiences, if you've gone to look at homes, your agent might show them to you in a specific order, right? Okay house, pretty nice house, because the pretty nice house seems even better if you've seen these other kind of mediocre homes first. Two other ways we might think about relativity is with upgrades. So imagine that you're buying in a new development, and often in new developments, you pick the house and you pick the location, but they get to ask you a bunch of questions like, hey, do you want this type of granite countertop? Do you want this or that additional things? And so what happens is we say, well, I'm paying $1 million for this house, so $10,000 more for this granite countertop? No big deal. It seems small in comparison to that big number. So we're more likely to just kind of do these add-ons, even though earlier today we went to the grocery store and we were trying to buy ingredients for a salad. And you know what? I'm going to buy tomatoes instead of cucumbers because the tomatoes are on sale. So I'm going to save $1.37 by doing that, right? So we kind of ignore this idea of absolute value, and we kind of double down on relativity. The other concept where relativity, or example where relativity absolutely comes into play, is thinking about the Joneses. So this concept of keeping up with the Joneses, we all are familiar with, right? And the idea here is we should be careful about choosing who are our Joneses. So I would almost say, let's not even try to not keep up with the Joneses. We just should admit we're likely going to try. And so more actionable is, should we just be careful what Joneses we pick? What I mean by that is, if you look at, so a good example is lottery winners, looking at the data there, looking at their neighbors. So what happens when somebody wins the lottery? What happens to their, you just want the lottery, you spend more money, it's visible to everyone. What happens to their neighbors? Any guesses? They start spending more money as well. Sadly, the statistics show that neighbors of lottery winners do spend more money and are actually more likely to go into bankruptcy. So just the takeaway here is be careful on who you pick as your Joneses. Okay, so for the home stretch here, we're going to go into specifically, like, let's pretend we're looking. I want to look at the tools. Remember, we talked about how the tools the environment, right? The systems that we use can shape our decisions. So let's say we're using one of these calculators. I just went online, searched for one, found this one. Where am I looking to buy? Type in zip code, all of this financial information. I made up some numbers there just to have screenshots for this. And it told me in my little made up exercise, 596. Oh, actually, what stands out to you before I happy to have you unmute if anyone wants to share out too. Or chat. What stands out?
Monthly payment.
The monthly stands out to you. Interesting. Okay. Okay, I would argue that this number is the kind of big one. And if anything, we should probably make the monthly a little bit larger. But absolutely, we're kind of anchoring on two numbers here. Yeah, so I think this one, we're kind of really kind of amplifying this. Everyone's probably familiar with this idea of anchoring. We've now set this idea of like, this is the number that I'm going to focus on. And very likely I'm going to end up with a home close to that, even though it's, you know, for all we know, I should or could look at homes that were much less, but we've now anchored me on that number. And I would say, yeah, so my point here would be we probably are under anchoring on this one. Look at the relative size of the two. You know, the HOA costs matter. So there's a world where you could be under budget for the home price, but actually your monthly payment ended up with an expensive HOA being much higher. So that's worth considering as well. Okay, so let's continue down this imaginary home buying process. And let's say we, you know, set our criteria, we searched, we went for all these different homes. We found this one that we really like, and it's 550,000. Beautiful little blue house. I start in that, I go to it. I start thinking about which furniture I want to put where I'm going to put this artwork, you know, the things that I'm going to do in this wonderful home. There's a great bakery across the street. They have wonderful croissants. I'm going to be going there. There's a dog park. Okay. Oh, I'm kind of envisioning this life that I'm going to have in this home. And I put an offer in, and what happens next? Anyone been? I'm just curious. Raise your hand if you're kind of been recently in the home buying market. What's going to happen next after you put the offer in?
Going to escalate.
It's going to escalate. That's exactly right. So the agent comes back and is like, you know what? The other people, they offered this much. What are you going to do? You're going to go up, because what's a little bit more? And you're going to get, and you're kind of attached to this home now. You have seen you envision this life there. I'm just going to cut to the chase here because you guys kind of get the gist of where I'm going with this. This is a real example. This home went up for sale, I believe, in June, and in August it sold for $700,000. So this is very common, these sort of bidding wars that happen. And this is our friend. This is our familiar friend, sunk cost. We've invested so much into it. And it's just what's a little more, when really in some scenarios we should really be walking away. So one tip here is to avoid that little slide that just automatically happens. Just a little more. Write down your number in advance. And just the reason I'm saying writing it down, it's harder to shift the number that's actually physically written down than one that's in your head, where we just slowly kind of shift it over time and we cheat. Okay. One last thing to close us, we're going to do renting versus buying. I'm going to go quickly on this. Lots of assumptions here. You know, the whole math depends on the assumptions, but really what I want to talk about here is this mental model that we have of renting as throwing away money and buying as investment. So let's pick renting at $3K a month, similar how the house is exactly the same. Let's say buying would be at 1 million. Annual cost would be, if we multiply that out by 12 months, 36,000. And in the case here of buying, let's assume we have 250,000 for a down payment, which means our loan is 750. Interest rate, currently 3%. I did kind of just some assumptions here. It's tax deductible, property tax, upkeep, picked a low amount. And so this, by the way, a key detail here is this is an interest only loan for the purpose of this assumption. So we're not including any principal. We're not owning the home in any way. This is just the math of just to kind of play the game here. It costs that, if we're thinking about throwing money away, these are the two equivalents here. Question for you, what's missing? If we're doing this comparison, what's missing?
Maintenance.
Opportunity cost. The maintenance is probably a little low. That's one thought. Yeah. So whoever just said opportunity cost is right. Equity is also another one. For the purpose of this exercise, we can, let's just assume for shits and giggles that we're at the top of the market and home prices are not gonna go up, and so we're not going to increase that. So this is what I'm talking about. Absolutely. So let's put the down payment invested at 5% here, which brings us to 12.5, which brings us overall to 23.5. So this is really just kind of showing, I wanted to break this mental model. And again, this is just one exercise. The key here is just for you all to do your own, there's wonderful calculators out there, go and fill them in. And so it's not, should not always be our assumption that, one is an investment and one is always throwing away money. And the other point here is, opportunity cost neglect, to be aware of that, to ignoring kind of what we have given up by tying that $250K down as a down payment. And this idea of mental accounting, we might think of this interest cost. We think of it very differently because of the mental bucket that goes in, and because we think of it as an investment. Okay, so very quickly, takeaways here: ignoring our anchors, ignoring what city you're from or whatever your bank approval rate is for a home purchase, paying attention to monthly payments, not just the price, not overspending on remodels and upgrades, picking your Joneses carefully, not getting in bidding wars, setting a max for yourself, writing it down, and don't assume buying is always a better investment.